Okay, so this is from later in the book. This is kind of getting towards the end, and this is going to raise more questions than it answers, which is why you're going to buy hell of copies of this book. At this point, James has to acknowledge this feeling that's been creeping up and down his spine since he first saw her at Walmart, but which so far he's been able to ignore. He's like, who the fuck is this person in my apartment? It's Maria. Probably she can see that he's kind of weirded out, so she starts talking, but he kind of talks over her. He's like, who are you? Like, for real. All I know about you is that you're trans and that you have a pretend dog and cat, and maybe you have pretend heroin too, but maybe it's real. What are you doing here? She's just like, yeah, okay, and then neither of them knows what to say, so again, James is like, for real, who are you? Maria's sitting on the floor and James is on the futon. She looks up at him from across the room with her bangs in her eyes, pushes her hair back off her forehead, her kind of big forehead, and sighs. Okay, she says, sure, I'm 29. I grew up in a shitty little cow town in Pennsylvania, moved to New York City after college, transitioned 6 years ago, and work in a bookstore. Well, I guess I used to work in a bookstore. I don't know. Like a month ago, I figured out that I was really unhappy with my life, so I stole my girlfriend's car, and I guess I just pointed it west. James thinks, yeah, and you're a heroin addict? And you were inevitably unhappy with your life because you're trans, right? Meaning, transition doesn't work. James is struggling with his gender. It's not funny. Meaning, transition doesn't work. But what he says is, it took you a month to drive a couple thousand miles. She smirks at him and pushes her hair back again. I don't know, she says. I guess so. I did a lot of hanging out in parking lots and stuff. James goes, on heroin? She laughs kind of too loud. Nah, she says, that whole thing is fucking stupid. When I was 16, I had a friend who was really into heroin, right? Used to buy hundreds of dollars worth at a time, right? And just do it recreationally. Shooting heroin on a Friday night or Tuesday night, it didn't matter. It was dumb teenage shit. Check out how tough we are. I latched onto him. When he'd go to Philadelphia and buy $400 worth, I'd give him 20 and have him bring me back a couple dime bags. Whatever. No big deal. She stops talking for a second and then nods, like she's figuring out how much of this story to tell him, and she's decided all of it. So yeah, check this out. She says, I just sort of broke up with my girlfriend. We had been together for a bunch of years and developed this routine where we had an apartment and cats and stuff, and our bills were under control. She had a grown-up job that was turning her into a grown-up kind of, and I realized, I guess I just figured out that I wasn't happy, right? I was blaming her for stuff and getting pissed that she was turning into a grown-up or whatever, but mostly I was just so checked out. I didn't even understand if I was mad or sad or confused or what, you know? James is like, I do know. So some dumb stuff happened, Maria says, and then we broke up, and I was like, well, shit, the problem is that I've been trying to be responsible and accountable to everybody else and to make sure that nobody was freaked out by me or my feelings or desires or whatever. I was like, the solution is to become as irresponsible as I can. Obviously, that turned out to be a totally stupid theory. Here's the thing, James H. When I was driving across the country, right, and hanging out in small town parks and Route 80 off-ramps and drinking truck stop coffee refills in the middle of the night, what I realized was that was not a pattern that started in my relationship with Steph. This was a pattern that went back my whole fucking life. I was totally checked out in high school to the point that it seemed like a good idea to try a little heroin now and then. I barely made facial expressions in grade school. I learned to fake it well enough that people didn't mistake me for an autistic kid. Actually, it's fucking wild if you think about it, how well being totally checked out emotionally can look like normal American masculinity. So looking back, I was like, holy shit, I don't remember much about being a little kid, but I must have checked out even back then, meaning started the pattern that me and Steph broke up over. When I was a little kid, when I started to develop a personality and a gender and to express that personality and gender, a tiny little dirtbag punker who didn't know anything about being trans or saying I want to be a girl, or I am a girl, who only knew that she wanted to be in Poison, to dress and act like the rock stars who were boys but who got to wear all the makeup and outfits. Everybody, everywhere, started socializing that stuff out of me. I was an observant kid. I looked around and I was like, well, shit, I'd better listen to these messages I'm getting from TV and from the grown-ups around me instead of whatever the fuck obviously incorrect brain is telling me. Whatever the fuck my obviously incorrect brain is telling me. Being completely checked out, that shit started when I was a tiny little kid. I started really hating myself when I figured this out, in a way that I'd never even felt before, like my fucking astral hate chakra had been revitalized. I was like, whoa, I have a lifetime's worth of unprocessed, shut down emotions to work through. So it's a good thing I'm by myself out here. I thought about it and wrote about it and stuff. And eventually, when I was like, cool, I have all this heroin, it'd probably be easier to overdose and die than it would be to work through, 25 years of self-invalidating habit? So I called my friend Piranha, who's always been way leveler-headed than me. And she was like, hey, stupid, did you ever stop to think that pattern, that coping mechanism was actually a brilliant strategy to keep yourself alive? She was like, listen up, dummy. When you are a little kid and it is the mid-'80s, saying, I need to be a girl is not the sort of thing that tends to be met with love and appreciation. It is the sort of thing that tends to get met with, well, you are a boy. And, well, we'd better butch him up. And, fuck, we had ourselves a little freak baby. And, shut the fuck up, Junior. Piranha was like, Maria, you dolt. The smartest thing you could have done in that no-win situation was to be like, okay, I'll play your game until I'm old enough to run away from it and figure out my own stupid game. She was like, which you did, right? You moved to New York, you transitioned, you fucking solved it. The problem wasn't the coping mechanism. The problem is that the coping mechanism became a pattern of behavior, and it is really hard to just up and end a behavior pattern. I was like, Piranha, man, why the fuck aren't you fucking rich? You are a genius. I said this kind of through tears, and she was like, Maria, I'm not rich because I'm trans and because I'm a woman. Stop on that. Thanks.